This story is about an alien student who discovers something moving inside a human's eye. Ethan Mills settled into his seat in the xenobiology lab aboard the University of Beta Vi Oi's orbital habitat. His dark brown eyes reflected the sterile glow of the ocular microscope before him. Across the room, Calyx, an Orothian biology major, hovered, six-fingered hands adjusting the focus knob. Calyx's pale lavender skin shimmered under the lab lights as he leaned closer. "Ready?" Ethan offered, voice careful. He eyed the biometric sensor attached to his temple. Standard procedure for all volunteer subjects. The session had seemed routine. Study comparative eye structure across sapient species. But what happened next would shatter expectations. Calyx murmured a single word in his native tongue. He froze, breath stuttering. Ethan peered over the microscope. Calyx's gaze locked on his iris, reflected in the device's curved lens. I see movement," Calyx said, voice tight. He recovered, blinking. "No, wait." He adjusted levels, increased magnification 5-fold. His breathing deepened. "It's intentional." Ethan's heart thundered. "Intentional? In my eye?" Calyx's agitation rippled outward through the lab's table. The other students crowded over. Screens flashed with live video. Ethan pressed his hands flat. "What is it?" Calyx exchanged a glance with Professor Roan, a veteran xenobiologist of the Zedran Council. Roan's mottled green skin paled under his signaling. Roan stepped forward. "Let's capture a scan." He tapped a control pad. A diagnostic array hummed. The iris image paused mid-magnification. Then something squirmed. A tiny coil of metallic reflection, shifting within tissue. Ethan winced. "Is it a parasite?" The lab fell silent. The diagnostic confirmed it. A small, worm-like organism, deeper than typical nematode larvae, embedded in the iris stroma. Blood flow? Unusual. Reflex blocks signified irritation. Ethan gasped. Professor Roan extracted a microbiopsy sample under local anesthesia. Ethan held his breath. It burned as the needle pricked, real pain. Beads of sweat gathered. The others watched awkwardly. Within minutes, the sample was sent to the lab's scanning bay. In the half-hour wait, Ethan's vision blurred. He frowned, feeling off. Rowan nodded sympathetically. "Minor inflammation. You'll be fine." Calyx paced. Could it be organic? Or a microtech implant? The biopsy returned. Not organic. Metallic. Impossible density. Complex microchips. Professor Rowan tapped into Interstellar databanks. This is surveillance tech, advanced, not from any registry. The lab's communique channel lit up. Authorities were notified. An interstellar security task force mobilized. Ethan's iris contained a spy module. Lab's scanner registered low-frequency transmissions, ongoing, streaming. Everything he saw was broadcast elsewhere. Ethan's pulse skyrocketed. Why me? Calyx's hands shook. I don't know. He swallowed. Could be targeted. Ruin eyed Ethan thoughtfully. Your position? Ethan worked for terrestrial envoy offices, negotiations, trade agreements. He met secretively with alien delegations. Among them was the Ofran Consortium, a powerful remote world with uncertain motives. The task force arrived, 2 humans, 1 Liaomin agent. They secured the lab instantly. Ethan sat restrained gently in a clean chair. Diagnostic instruments clattered, wires snapped photos. Calyx provided translation. Ethan shut his eyes. Reality unraveled. His life, his memories, private thoughts leaked. They administered a retractable scan to trace signal. It pinpointed an unregistered satellite far beyond the outer belt. The parasite relayed via that. No known operator, no claim of origin. Rowan whispered in Ethan's ear. We need to extract it, surgically, but this thing is embedded in the pupillary sphincter. Removal risks blindness. He paused. We have what we need to start. I'll lead the extraction. The task force official stood. Time is critical. Ethan closed his eyes again. Daylight shimmered beyond the viewport. He breathed in. The spotlight on his eye felt overwhelming. He realized that despite the terror, the procedure would preserve his sight, but also they would uncover more about this device before removal. Understanding why it was there meant risking transmission through his memories. He opened his eyes. The device pulsed faintly under instrumentation lights, and beyond the microscope, Calix watched, awestruck. "Proceed," Ethan whispered. That night, Farhud Jen, Afrani's envoy to the habitat, watched encrypted news broadcasts. The surveillance device's discovery buzzed through galactic media. Farhud's violet eyes narrowed. His world had not authorized such operations. His leaders would demand answers. But something, an advantage, lingered. On Earth, a federal representative prepared a sealed intelligence dossier. The question on everyone's lips: how deep did the transmissions go, and who directed them? In the cold, sterile lab Ethan's surgery awaited at dawn, the first extraction wave would begin. His vision and its secrets hung in the balance. The surgical suite aboard the University of Beta VIE's orbital habitat smelled faintly of sterilizing compounds and ozone. Ethan lay flat under the scanner arc, one eye immobilized by neural inhibitors. The surgical team surrounded him in concentric rings, murmuring in clipped tones. Rowan stood at the head, hands gloved, mask tight. His usual calm had fractured beneath tension. A digital overlay hovered over Ethan's face, mapping his iris in real time. The parasite nestled along the inner edge, partially fused with tissue. The risk of removing it without damaging the optic nerve or inducing retinal collapse was high. Calix had stayed through the night. He sat at the observation panel now, arms wrapped tightly around his middle. "He'll lose vision if you sever the inner coils." Rowan nodded curtly. "That's why we're not severing anything. We're suspending neural impulses with a cold field stasis. If we detach the anchor nodes in one controlled motion, it should retract its filaments voluntarily." Ethan's pulse climbed despite the sedative drip. "You're saying it'll let go?" "If it's intelligent," Rowan replied, "it might respond to the shutdown sequence. If not, we're improvising." No one laughed. The first probe slid into his eye through a microscopic corneal slit. He didn't feel it, but the system read subtle tremors in his body, autonomic responses that couldn't be suppressed. A buzzing echoed deep in his skull, not pain, pressure, foreign awareness. He gritted his teeth. The parasite twitched. Rowan leaned forward. Movement, again. A monitor flashed. Within the iris, the slender coil recoiled from the probe tip like a startled eel. Then it shifted again, 3 times. Like Morse code. Calix rose to his feet. It's reacting to the scan. It understands the probe, which means it has some form of threat response. Rowan's eyes flicked to the Liao Min security officer at his left. "Don't jam the signal yet. I want to see what it does." The coil shivered violently, then relaxed. Its filaments uncoiled from the pupillary tissue with the delicacy of threads unwinding from silk. It didn't retract, it didn't attack. It extended outward. Ethan's heart lurched. "Is it crawling out?" "No," Rowan said grimly. "It's presenting itself." The coil curled in a tight helix on the lens surface, as if waiting, a silent surrender. Rowan inserted the capture chamber. The coil slid in, almost eagerly. The moment it was enclosed, Ethan's vision sharpened. The blurring ceased. His eye ached, but the pressure was gone. The device floated inside its chamber, spinning lazily. Now visible in full, a tiny black and silver worm no longer than a millimeter. No eyes, no limbs, but covered in nanoscale ports and ridged antennae. A machine. A watcher. A long breath hissed from Calix's nostrils. Why would something that advanced give itself up? No one had an answer. 2 hours later, the task force had sequestered the lab, Ethan's eye was treated with regenerative drops, and the worm was sealed in a quantum-isolated analysis cube. Ethan wore a heavy eye patch. He sat upright, slowly adjusting to monocular vision. Rowan entered quietly. "You'll heal. Vision should return in full within 3 weeks. We'll monitor for scarring, no permanent damage expected." Ethan leaned back against the cot. "So, what now?" "We analyze it, and we track who sent it." They began with the transmission log. The parasite hadn't just relayed live video, it had recorded and stored thousands of gigaseconds of data, compressed into a fluid memory gel. Scenes from Ethan's perspective, diplomatic meetings, market strolls, even silent late nights in his cabin, brushing teeth or reading memos, every moment cataloged. But the content wasn't random. A pattern emerged. It only recorded when Ethan interacted with non-human officials. Calix stared at the screen in disbelief. It's been harvesting political interactions, all alien ones, not Earth-based. The Liaomin officer nodded. "It's a reconnaissance tool. Someone's profiling alien-human negotiations, watching every gesture, every word, every tone." Calix whispered. "It wasn't spying on Earth. It was watching us." Ethan wasn't allowed to return to his quarters. He was temporarily relocated to a private chamber deep within the medical wing. Armed escorts stood watch, every call screened, every visitor scanned. He wasn't angry, just exhausted. On day 2, Calix visited with an armful of medical patches and data pads. He handed Ethan a thin visual aid overlay, a temporary fix for his depth perception. "I pulled restricted logs," Calix admitted. "Rowan doesn't know yet." Ethan blinked. "Calix, you're a student, and you had an alien AI in your eye. So, we're both out of our depth." He tapped the screen. "The device isn't just transmitting, it's responding. Someone on the other side is logging the moments it finds significant. Their filters tag spikes in emotional intensity, vocal modulation, even muscle tension in diplomats. They're studying how alien officials react to you." Ethan leaned forward. "Not me, humanity." Felix nodded. "They're building a behavioral map of how other species behave around humans." Ethan went cold. The Offernese ambassador was recalled from the habitat. The Galactic Council requested a full audit. No trace of the satellite that relayed the data remained. It had self-destructed the moment the parasite was extracted. On day 5, Ethan's left eye regained partial responsiveness. He sat under the biolight with Calix, playing a quiet game of strategy tiles. Neither spoke until Calix set his tile with a heavy click. "Ethan," he said, "they didn't choose you randomly." Ethan didn't answer. "You've met with 12 alien delegates in the last year. You negotiated 4 new accords. You de-escalated 3 disputes. They wanted to know why others trust humans." Ethan's voice was low, or why they shouldn't. Calix nodded. When the analysis cube cracked the device's encrypted onboard memory, it triggered a fail-safe. No explosion, just a sound. A pulse. A high-frequency tone emitted through the lab's speakers. Subaudible, harmless. But it wasn't meant for them. It was a signal. A day later, a hidden cache of dormant surveillance devices activated in 5 other colonies. Embedded in water filters, retinal lenses, neural implants, every device traced back to the same manufacturer. Not Earth. Not any known system. The devices weren't harvesting internal data. They were watching for social behavior, studying alien societies in contact with Earth. And always through human eyes. By week 2, Ethan's depth perception returned fully. His eyes still watered in dry rooms, but he could read again. He attended the council hearing via secure feed, his presence a condition of transparency. Rowan gave testimony. Calix submitted his findings. The Liaomin officer presented evidence that Earth was not the target, but the lens. The bridge, the unknown planet wanted to see the galaxy's reaction to humans, not to evaluate humans themselves. Ethan watched the feeds in silence, one hand pressed over his patched eye, breathing slowly. The galactic ambassador asked the question that silenced the room. If these devices aren't spying on Earth, then what do they think we'll do when we realize? No one answered. But Calix turned to Ethan later that night and said, "They're not afraid of you." Ethan looked up. Then what? "They're preparing." Ethan lay back on the bunk, one eye open, one closed. He didn't sleep. A week after that, Earth's Defense Council began quietly rolling out new ocular scans across all diplomatic personnel. Trust between species shifted subtly. Some grew cautious around humans, unsure if their words would be witnessed from the inside. Ethan underwent his final scan. No further implants detected. But he knew. Somewhere out there, on a planet with no name and no allegiance, someone still watched. Not to learn about humans, but to study the galaxy through the only lens it didn't understand. A human one. 3 weeks after the parasite's extraction, Ethan stood before a full-length mirror in the Orbital Habitat's rehab wing. The swelling had subsided, the sclera returned to its typical hue, his vision was crisp again, eerily so. The eye drops had accelerated healing, and although his sight was medically fully restored, it still felt foreign, sharper, as if his brain wasn't just seeing, like it was expecting more. He blinked, half hoping he'd catch a flicker of something wriggling behind the iris again. Nothing. Calix arrived mid-morning, armed with 2 steaming cups and a data pad pressed under one elbow. He didn't bother knocking. "New update, and you're going to love it," he said, placing one cup in Ethan's hand and thumbing the pad on. The screen lit with 3 images, high-resolution scans of other ocular parasites, each a perfect match for the one extracted from Ethan. But these were different. "These ones aren't from humans," Calix said. "They were recovered from a Chovaran ambassador, a Frintar archivist, and 1 Terran hybrid diplomat from Mershal Station. All 3 had implants. Same architecture, same transmission structure." Ethan took a breath. "So it wasn't just me." Calix shook his head. "You were the first we caught in real time. The others, they were dead by the time anyone found the parasites." Ethan lowered the cup. "Dead how?" 2 from sudden retinal failure, 1 from a cranial embolism. Nothing outwardly violent, clean, precise. Medical teams missed the devices until full autopsy. That word again, precise. Ethan hated it now. He rubbed his temple. "They kill the hosts if they're discovered. Or if they become redundant," Calix replied. "But we're starting to understand their pattern. Each subject was either in a position of cross-species communication or was about to be promoted into one." Ethan glanced at the data stream. The implications gnawed at him. This wasn't about gathering intelligence. It was selective recruitment. The parasites were picking targets who acted as bridges between species. "I think they're watching how diplomacy happens," he muttered. "Not just what's said, how we handle tension, emotion, expression, deceit." Calix pointed at a blinking icon. "We believe they measure empathy." Ethan blinked. "You're saying they're training an AI to mimic interspecies empathy?" Calix hesitated, or preparing to counterfeit. In a secure lab chamber, the device from Ethan's eye sat in an isolation cradle. It hadn't moved in days. Until that morning, Technician Sorel, a 4-armed Vunari, had been calibrating ambient radiation levels when the cradle's shielding flickered. The device twitched. Not mechanically, not electrically. It curled and uncurled like a living thing, flexing as if waking from sleep. Sorel activated a kinetic barrier and called for Ronan. By the time the professor arrived, the device had stopped moving again. But the motion had triggered a transmission spike. Short, sharp, directed, but not outbound. It had connected to something within the station. A second device. Panic spread quickly through the top-level command. A full biometric scan was authorized. Every being on the station. A dozen scans later, they found it. Hidden within the synthetic optic nerve of a recently installed Vistari diplomat. She hadn't known. Her right eye was a transplant, purchased off-world after an industrial accident years ago. The parasite hadn't just been embedded. It had grown into the replacement tissue. It didn't look foreign anymore. The removal was not successful. Her nervous system failed the moment the team tried to deactivate the worm's coils. 2 organs failed in unison. A technician screamed. The autopsy was inconclusive. Rowan submitted a recommendation: no removals without detailed modeling. The parasites had adaptive safeguards now, fail-safes. They were learning from every encounter. Ethan was the only living host to survive a full extraction. By the 4th week, Ethan returned to work on limited status. His assignments were indirect now: consulting, archival review, back-channel protocol. No diplomatic front lines, no in-person meetings. He didn't argue. Not after the 2nd incident. He kept seeing people watching him longer than necessary. Guards nodded at him with a kind of reverence. Scientists flinched. Visitors whispered. The man whose eye had hosted the lens of a hidden intelligence. He was becoming a myth, and myths, in space, had dangerous shelf lives. One afternoon, Calyx walked in with a file sealed with priority clearance. This came through Earth's Central Neuroengineering Board. Thought you should see it. Ethan opened the packet. It contained research logs from a military-funded biocybernetics lab. Years ago, they'd been working on nano-optical surveillance systems. Microscopic ocular drones designed to record internal and external activity. Untraceable, but too complex to control. The project was shelved, except for one prototype, stolen during transit. Disappeared before launch. Ethan's stomach turned. You're saying this thing could have been our tech? Calyx nodded grimly. Reverse engineered, maybe. Or piggybacked. It's possible someone found your prototype and retooled it to watch from the inside. Ethan tossed the file onto the table. So it's not just aliens studying us. No, Calyx said, folding his arms. It's everyone studying each other. But your lens became the standard. You were reliable. You moved between groups freely. You were watched from all sides. Another week passed. The orbital habitat's civilian population dropped by 30%. Families relocated to planetary surfaces. Officially for routine rotation. Unofficially, no one wanted to share oxygen with spy tech that lived inside people's eyes. Ethan met with the habitat director in private. You'll be assigned a ground post, she told him. Nothing permanent. Just till this stabilizes. The council wants the devices off this station, and that includes their former hosts. You're evacuating me. She didn't deny it. We packed that night. Calyx joined him late, helped collapse the modular shelves and disconnect the wall console. They worked in silence. Then, finally, I don't think it's done with you. Ethan paused. The device? Calyx shook his head. Whoever's watching, you were too valuable a lens. I don't think they'll just walk away. Ethan zipped the travel case shut. What do I do then? Live visibly. Let them see what they want. But be aware of what you see. Calyx reached into his satchel and handed Ethan a new lens overlay. This one has a passive diagnostic. If anything ever tries to access your ocular channel again, it'll light up red. Ethan held the thin wafer between thumb and forefinger. Almost weightless, almost unreal. He smiled weakly. Feels like insurance against the universe. Calyx shrugged. Or bait. The next morning, the shuttle drifted from the habitat ring, its engine trail glimmering in orbit. Ethan sat near the viewport, staring out into the void. His eye itched, just faintly. But when he glanced at his reflection in the glass, nothing moved. No red light, no shimmer, just his face, his eye, his vision, and far beyond, something watched back. Ethan landed on the planet's surface under a thick canopy of clouds. The relocation center sat at the edge of a temperate basin on a quiet, Terran-aligned world called Relin's Shade, chosen for its isolation, not its charm. Even in daylight, the horizon looked bruised, smeared by drifting vapors and rolling fog. The air tasted metallic, artificial weather controlled every aspect of the ecosystem. 2 guards met him at the pad, scanning his ID and retinal signature with cool professionalism. No reaction to his file, no whispered questions. Word had gotten around not to make eye contact too long with Ethan Mills. They assigned him quarters inside a high-walled diplomatic compound, fortified, secure, and under constant observation. Irony wasn't lost on him. A week passed. Then 2. No incidents, no signals. The red light on his diagnostic overlay never flickered. At first, the silence soothed. Then it started to itch. Ethan caught himself glancing at reflections too often. Window glass, puddles, polished walls, half expecting to see the shimmer of that old parasite. But there was nothing. Rowan sent the occasional encrypted message, updates on containment, speculations, always scientific. Calyx sent longer notes, usually philosophical rambles, riddled with jokes about installing firewalls in eyeballs, and how Ethan should market anti-spy contact. But even Calyx's tone had shifted by the 3rd message. He didn't outright say it, but the unspoken thread hung in every word. The Watchers hadn't stopped. They had just gotten better. On day 19, Ethan was summoned to a meeting with the planetary liaison, an older woman named Delia Harrow, who had the diplomatic precision of a scalpel and the patience of a lunar tide. She didn't offer small talk. "We've intercepted a query," she said, sliding a datapad across her desk. Ethan scanned it. A transmission, narrow-beamed, had pinged the planetary net from a stealth satellite in outer orbit. A single phrase repeated, encoded in variable waveform. Perspective required. Subject 17K active. Ethan looked up. "They're asking if I'm still transmitting." Delia nodded. "They assume the channel's open, or they want us to believe that." Ethan handed the pad back. "Did you respond?" "No, but I want to." Ethan's brow furrowed. "To bait them?" "To see who blinks first," she said. "I've authorized a decoy operation, a surrogate implanted with a false ocular signal mimicking the device's old frequency. If they're listening, they'll shift focus, and we'll catch the echo." He shook his head slowly. "You're using a person to lure a hidden civilization." Delia didn't blink. "We've done worse for less insight." The surrogate was a volunteer, a Terran linguist named Rayner with no diplomatic clearance and a contract hazard bonus too large to ignore. He knew what he was walking into. The implant was inert, non-functional, just a shell, broadcasting noise on a loop. Safe, supposedly. For 5 days, Rayner walked through embassies, attended interspecies meet and greets, and played his role. He made deliberate gestures, casual expressions, false empathy for invisible eyes, and then he collapsed on day 6. No sign of trauma, just a seizure, a momentary blackout. Scan showed no damage, no foreign presence, nothing. But the compound's external satellites had logged something the moment Rayner fell. A brief gravimetric lensing signature, too sharp to be natural. A ship had cloaked nearby. A watcher, maybe? It didn't stay. After the incident, Delia grounded the program. "We stirred something," she said. "Something watching too closely." Ethan walked the perimeter that night, hand in his coat pocket, feeling the cool smoothness of Calyx's diagnostic lens. Still no flicker. But now he doubted it. If they'd advanced their surveillance, what were the odds they still used the same methods? What if they no longer needed devices at all? What if they had learned to watch without tools? What if they'd become the lens? The answer came 2 weeks later. A package arrived. No return trace. Delivered physically, left at the secure gatehouse, an analog relic in a world of transmission and holograms. Inside, a small cube. Old Terran metalwork. Not alien. Ethan opened it in private. The cube powered on with a Hume and displayed a single image, his own eye, magnified, but not from before. From now, it had been taken recently, a perfect frame from the present week. His pupil, mid-dilation, the faint scar where the device had been removed. He recoiled. Checked every sensor, every angle, scanned the room. No camera detected, nothing broadcast. And then the message followed, scrolling in crisp white text. No more tools, no more lenses, only understanding. You taught us how to see. Lay beneath it a series of timestamps. Every one coincided with high-level diplomatic decisions made across the galaxy. Trade halts, treaties stalled, an ambassador's sudden illness. All perfectly timed. Not because of Ethan, but because of what Ethan had shown them. They weren't watching to copy humans. They were watching to understand everyone else's reaction to humanity, and to learn how to manipulate it. The next day, Ethan called Ren. They don't need the devices anymore, he said. They watched us watching them, and now they understand how to move within our blind spots. Rowan was quiet for a long time. So what do we do now? Ethan didn't answer at first. Then, we stop being predictable. We stop giving them a pattern to study. We fragment the lens. He ended the call and walked to the compound's comm tower. He drafted a message, one that would go to every allied species, every neutral party, every system not yet aware. We were all the subject, the lens was a decoy, the study is complete. He ended with a warning. Do not isolate humans, do not elevate us, do not fear us. All of those responses are being cataloged. The real threat isn't what they see through us, it's what they do with how you react. He paused, then added one last line. They've stopped watching. Now they're interpreting. Years later, after Ethan retired to a quiet observatory near Saturn's rings, an encrypted file reached his inbox. Untraceable. No sender. Inside, a moving image. Calyx, older, smiling faintly. A recording. I think we finally understand what they wanted, he said. Not data, not leverage, not war. They wanted to see if empathy could be replicated, not copied, synthesized. He leaned back in the frame, and I think they realized it can't. Not fully, not without cost. The image blinked out.
Ethan stared at the blank screen.
He stepped out into the dome, eyes lifted toward the stars. They weren't watching anymore. But the galaxy had changed, and the lens through which it viewed itself now carried a reflection no one could erase. Not surveillance. Perspective.